June 2023. A decorated United States intelligence officer sits down in front of a camera and says something extraordinary. He claims the first government recovery of a crashed non-human craft did not happen in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. It happened 14 years earlier in Fascist Italy under the orders of Benito Mussolini, and according to him, the secret was kept, in part, by the Vatican itself. His name is David Grusch, and this is the story of the Magenta incident, the case some call the Italian Roswell. Before we begin, one thing matters here more than anywhere else in ufology. This story rests on documents that no historian has been able to independently verify. We are going to tell you exactly what is claimed, where the claims come from, and what the skeptics say is missing. Because on this channel, the gaps in a story are just as important as the story itself. Part 1. What Grusch actually said. David Grusch was not a fringe figure. He was a former intelligence officer with the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency and the National Reconnaissance Office, and he had worked with the Pentagon's own UAP task force. In June 2023, he gave an interview to investigative journalist Ross Coulthart on News Nation, and in that interview, he made a claim that stunned even veteran researchers. He said, quote, 1933 was the first recovery in Europe in Magenta, Italy. They recovered a partially intact vehicle, and the Italian government moved it to a secure airbase in Italy until around 1944-1945. The Pope back-channeled that and told the Americans what the Italians had, and we ended up scooping it, end quote. Coulthart pressed him. Was he really saying the Catholic Church knew about the existence of non-human intelligence? Grusch answered with a single word. Certainly. Now, here is a detail that gets misremembered constantly, and it matters. 1 month later, in July 2023, Grusch testified under oath before the House Oversight Committee in Washington. In that sworn testimony, he described a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval and reverse engineering program. But he never mentioned Italy. He never mentioned 1933. He never mentioned Magenta or the Vatican. The Italian claim exists in one place only, the News Nation interview. Grusch was not speaking under oath when he said it, and by his own account, he was relaying what other people inside the program had told him. He did not investigate the case himself. So, where does the Magenta story actually come from? To answer that, we have to go back to Italy in the 1990s. Part 2. Mr. X and the Fascist UFO Files. In 1996, an Italian researcher named Roberto Pinotti, founder of Italy's National Ufology Center, began receiving documents in the mail. They came anonymously from a source who identified himself only as Mr. X. The man claimed he had inherited the papers from a relative connected to Mussolini's regime. Working with his colleague Alfredo Lissoni, Pinotti went public with the collection around the year 2000. The Italian press dubbed them the Fascist UFO Files. The story those documents tell reads like something out of a thriller. On June 13, 1933, an unconventional craft described as bell-shaped or disc-shaped, roughly 10 to 12 meters across, crashed or made a forced landing in Lombardy in northern Italy. Some documents point to the town of Magenta, just west of Milan. Others point to the area around Vergiate near Lacemaggiore. Keep that discrepancy in mind. It will matter later. According to the documents, Mussolini's government moved instantly. A total press blackout was ordered, and a secret study group was created to examine the wreckage, Gabinetto RS-33, short for Ricerca Speciali, or Special Research 1933. The group was allegedly placed under the nominal direction of the most famous scientist in Italy, Nobel laureate Guglielmo Marconi, the father of radio. Later versions of the story add a final chapter. The wreckage, it is said, was stored at the CII Marchetti Aircraft Works in Vergiate, where it sat for over a decade. Then, in 1944 or 1945, as the war turned and Allied forces swept through Italy, American intelligence personnel allegedly located the craft and took it. This is precisely the point where Grusch's Vatican claim connects to the older Italian legend. The Pope, he said, back-channeled to the Americans what the Italians had. Part 3. The Telegrams. The most striking items in the Pinati and Lissoni collection are two telegrams dated June 1933. The first demands, quote, absolute silence, end quote, regarding an alleged landing on national soil of an unknown aircraft. The second, dated June 13th, goes further. It threatens journalists with immediate arrest and maximum penalties for reporting on, quote, an aircraft of unknown nature and origin, end quote. Lissoni has claimed he separately located roughly 500 copies of telegrams sent by Italian prefects to the central government between 1933 and 1938, some of which reference unconventional flying vehicles. If authentic, these papers would be the earliest known government documents about a UFO crash anywhere in the world. That word, if, is carrying a great deal of weight. Because here is the problem. Every single document in circulation traces back to the same anonymous Mr. X. Not one has emerged from a public archive with a verifiable chain of custody. Part 4. The Vatican Angle. When Grusch named the Vatican, NewsNation did something to its credit. It did not simply air the claim and move on. It investigated. Reporter Susie Pinto traveled to Magenta itself. The network sought comment from the Vatican for roughly a week. No public response ever came. But there was one more step. A source with access to Vatican archival records searched on the network's behalf. The result? No listed reference to the alleged Magenta incident, no record of any communication about it ever being sent to a pope. That does not conclusively disprove Grusch's claim, but it directly undercuts the idea that documentary evidence of a papal back channel is sitting in the Vatican archives. The Vatican itself has never issued an official statement on Grusch's claims. Its own observatory has historically avoided the UFO topic entirely. One former director called it a very touchy subject, tainted badly, in his words, by the charlatans who have poisoned the topic. Part 5. Why historians are not convinced. Set against this remarkable story is a long list of unresolved problems. First, no independent corroboration. Not one Italian historian has produced a Marconi diary entry, a directive from Air Minister Italo Balbo, a note from Foreign Minister Galeazzo Ciano, a secret police log, or a CII Marchetti inventory record confirming that Gabinetto RS-33 ever existed. For a program supposedly involving the most famous scientist in the country, the silence of the archives is deafening. Second, the single source problem. Everything flows from Mr. X, an anonymous man with anonymous documents of unknown origin. Third, authenticity. The Italian skeptic organization CSU says the documents have never passed basic authenticity checks. Forensic dating of the ink and paper has been claimed over the years, but the full results have never been published. Fourth, the geography keeps shifting. Sometimes the crash is at Magenta. Sometimes it is at Vergiate, near Lake Maggiore. Those locations are roughly 40 kilometers apart. That is the kind of detail that drifts when a story is retold, not when it is documented. And fifth, there is a mundane alternative. In 1950, an Italian engineer named Giuseppe Belluzzo publicly claimed that Italy and Germany had experimented with disc-shaped aircraft prototypes in the early 1940s. Real machines, human machines. Some skeptics argue that if the 1933 story has any basis at all, it may be tangled up with this later, entirely earthly engineering history. None of this proves the Magenta case is false, but it means the case currently rests on photocopies that cannot be verified, repeated decades later by a whistleblower who says he was told about it secondhand. Part 6. Why this case matters. So why does a 90-year-old story from northern Italy matter today? Because of what it would mean if it were ever confirmed. The timeline of government crash retrievals would be pushed back 14 years before Roswell. A pre-war European program would connect directly to the post-war American one described in claims like Majestic 12, and the Catholic Church would be woven into the deepest secret of the modern era. This is exactly the kind of claim, old, compelling, and undocumented, that the current wave of American disclosure efforts is supposed to resolve. The UAP Disclosure Act, the Pentagon's Pursue portal. Their entire purpose is to move stories like Magenta out of the realm of anonymous photocopies and secondhand testimony and into declassified government records. Until that happens, the Italian Roswell remains what it has been since 1996, a locked door with a very strange key. If you want the full documented breakdown of this case, including the telegram images and every source we used, the complete article is linked in the description below at uapdisclosurereads.com. If stories like this one matter to you, subscribe. There are more cases in the files, and some of them are even stranger than this. Thank you for spending this time with me. I will see you in the next story.